there, and welcome back to Embracing Amazing with your host, Kayla Rollins. And we are here with your guest today, Andrea. Hi, Andrea. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi. Thanks.
So, you own Pixie Painthings. Tell me a little bit about how you got started, a little bit why you named your business Pixie Painthings.
Sure. It's a really long story,
actually. That's okay. We love long stories.
Yeah, I don't think there was ever like one point where I decided to start my business. It's definitely been a transition throughout my life. I guess if I could shorten it and I could get back into the backstories, I started Pixie Painthings as it is today 3 years ago with that name. It was more art-based, painting-based at the beginning, and that's why I named it Pixie Painthings. And the intention of that was that I had my jewelry, it was Pixie-Inspired, I had paintings of pixies, and it was like Pixie Paintings and other things, so Pixie Painthings.
Okay, that's wonderful.
But it has transitioned a lot since then.
Okay.
Now I don't really have as much traditional art like the paintings. I have more botanical collages with the fairies, and mainly it's all jewelry.
Oh, wonderful.
So people read my name differently now, and I find a lot of people think it's like, oh, it's Pixie Painthings, and I'm like, it's nothing painful.
Oh.
And it upset me for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm kind of re-owning it. And
yeah.
My dad told me, he's like, no, like, look at your art, look at these fairies. There's a lot of pain, there's transition, there's renewal. And I'm like, you know what, it's true. And I kind of, like, love it now.
Yeah. So you mentioned your dad. Yeah. Is he a huge inspiration in your business?
I mean, my dad's side of the family is how I got started in art, actually.
Okay.
Like, that's really where I consider the start of everything, and started in my interest in nature and making that a part of my story. Because I grew up with my grandparents on like 3 acres of land, outskirts of London, what used to be called Broccoli.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a township of Broccoli. It was absorbed in London, I think, in 1998. But we still have our sign. And it's basically just half of Dingman Drive that is Broccoli.
Wonderful. That's awesome.
Yeah. So my grandma has a shop there, Crafty Kennedy's.
Okay.
So I learned how to paint there from my grandma. She taught me to paint before I could write. And then my grandpa would take me hiking and we'd look for mushrooms, and my dad and my grandpa always taught me the names of the flowers, the names of the trees. So that's kind of how I got into all of that.
That's amazing. So you went adventuring a lot when you were younger then. Is that something that you use now in your own business?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Like, I grew up outside. I only came inside when I heard my grandma yelling at me for lunch. It was just for meals and to go to sleep. I was always outside, always picking flowers, collecting butterflies and frogs and all that.
That's amazing.
So,
is there one flower or insect or something that resonates a little bit more with you or means something?
Yeah, actually, I think there's a few. I'm really connected to birch bark. Like, birch bark's really important to me because we have this one really big birch tree at my grandpa's that's been one of my favorites. And you can do so much with birch bark in art. I use a lot.
Absolutely.
Recently, I've been using it more in my pieces, more in my jewelry and art. And then I was getting more into the symbolism of it, and it being called in the Celtic tradition, the Lady of the Woods. Which is really cool because I'm part Celtic, Norse, and Indigenous, and it has really strong symbolism in both cultures.
That's amazing.
And traditions, yeah.
Is that something that you put into your artwork, is some of your culture?
I do, yeah. So I have a big focus on education and nature, like education, I guess. So I always have with my bigger collections little info cards that tell you about the different elements used and what they're used for spiritually or what they represent in, like, my heritage.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. So is that something that your parents growing up taught you how to use those elements into your everyday life?
It's kind of funny because it's not something that I grew up with a lot. I grew up with a very scientific base where my grandpa and dad would just teach me the names, what I can use it for. and if you can eat it or don't eat it. And my dad's rule is always just don't eat it. Like, that's the safe rule.
Yep,
my grandpa, we would risk things, and he'd get mad sometimes when we're eating mushrooms from the field.
Oh my.
But I got more into the like holistic kind of approach and symbolism and traditions as I got older, because I was looking more into like my heritage and background, reconnecting to my indigenous roots, and that's when I started to get more inspired from like more witch communities and indigenous communities, and realize like how we can use nature in different ways and be inspired by nature.
Absolutely.
So it's, like,
did you ever have a bad experience eating a bad mushroom?
No.
No.
Luckily not.
Oh, thank goodness.
My grandpa's like, he's okay, so
yeah.
Without him now, harvesting mushrooms is really scary, and I haven't done it without him until last weekend. It was my first weekend. I was brave enough. I got all my books out. I Google ID'd it, and I'm like, okay, this is a for sure edible mushroom. And I was staring at it, and I was still a little concerned, and this old man with a walking stick started walking down the path, and he looked at it, and he's like, you know you can eat that. I was like, thank you, Grandpa.
Exactly right.
Yeah, I cooked it. It was great.
So are there any local trails that you'd like to frequent a little bit more than others?
I started with Meadow Lily. Like, I love Meadow Lily for its diversity. There's so much diverse plant life there, and every week I go and I visit my snapping turtle friend that's been hanging out there. He scared me the first time, but like,
oh my goodness, tell me about him.
Okay, so there's this one part of Meadow Lily, if you go off, like there's the main trail and you go off like kind of that side trail.
Okay.
That's a really bad explanation, but he's my snapping turtle, so if you don't find him, it's fine. There's like this swampy pond area with a log that you can cross across the pond on this fallen log.
Okay.
And he's always chilling by that log. The first time I was there, I was putting things in my book, and I seen some movement, and it was a snapping turtle like this big, and he was right next to me, scared the like absolute heck out of me.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
But now he's chill. We're good.
That's amazing.
But since then, I've been finding a lot of cicada wings, and cicada wings are my favorite to work with, because when I imagine a pixie that can be from any kind of traditional teachings, because pixies and fairies and the fays and the little people, they show up in a lot of stories across the world. They're called different things. And I think when I think of those cicada wings, they're really neutral. They're not like the big, beautiful butterfly wings you would see from like European fairies. And I just like that they're pretty diverse in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So that's something that you're now kind of focusing on or bringing into your artwork, is more of the insects and bugs.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like that's where it started, and I'm now bringing it back, because I did start...
Okay.
With the initial influence of the fairies, I made a fairy collage out of bug wings, and I was like, this is really cool. And I kind of left it because it was rare to find these bug wings, and then I started making jewelry, and I got really caught in the cycle of making jewelry to maintain myself financially, and that's just what's been working. But
absolutely,
I've been finding that I need to get back to those like creative roots, and what really inspired me was making like those art pieces, big art pieces, and bringing in like new life through elements that I found that are dead, like the wings. So I've been trying to bring those back, and I've started making a new line that is my jewelry botanical fairy collage necklaces.
Oh,
so now I have very, very tiny fairies I've put into necklaces, and I'll either use petals, and a few of them I actually use bee wings. So really cute.
Wow. Yeah. So with using something that small, what do you find the challenges in using natural elements in your artwork?
There's a lot of challenges. The foliage, botanicals, it was a learning process to figure out how to encase them in resin and how to make that work. I've tried many different things, many different resins, but really just comes down to like dehydrating them as fast and as you can, and getting all the moisture out, and then using them fast before they lose the color. So yeah. It's just a little bit of a challenge. That's
amazing. So if you had any advice for somebody who was just starting out in a similar craft as you, what kind of advice would you give them?
Ooh, watch a lot of YouTube videos. That's how I started. A lot of people ask me, how'd you get into like resin jewelry? And ask if I went to school for it. I'm like, well, no, I went to school for sociology. I went to school for Fine Arts Foundation, studio art. So I have a traditional art background. But jewelry and resin, that's something I taught myself from YouTube. And I get a lot of people asking me, well, how'd you do it? Would you teach me? And I'm like, well, no, I don't really have time to teach you. Maybe one day, but like,
Yeah.
just learn it off YouTube. You can learn so much from the internet. It's at your fingertips. You don't have to go to school. You can do it.
So how have you used your education at college to kind of educate and fuel your business now?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, at the beginning, because I did go to school originally for sociology, and that was my goal, was to do something in the social like research sector.
Okay.
And that wasn't really working out. And I had a studio arts minor from that school, and I have a long history of like fine arts background just from family teachings.
Okay.
And I was like, how can I make both of these things mesh and like everything that interests me mesh? And one of the main things I really loved about sociology was learning about different people groups and traditions.
Okay. Yeah.
So then I was like, well, I'm going to research more about my culture, my traditions, and how can I bring that into art and bring that into like renewal and sustainability and foraging, and just kind of molded it all together.
Wow. So that's like everything all in one.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So on top of having all of this business structure and education on top, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Oof.
I know, tough question.
See, you said business structure, and that implies I know what I'm doing. But I'm very, very, very new to being fully self-employed artist now. I'm still like trying to figure out what that means for me and what that's gonna look like next week, let alone 5 years from now.
Absolutely.
But if I could dream and like, without really going through the facts and all that, but I dream 5 years from now I'd be in BC. But I just want to build it so like I can be more sustainable, I guess, like as an online business. That way I could travel and live in BC, because that's where I'd love to live. That's where my family's from. That's where my mom's and indigenous roots are from. And I always feel the most at home and inspired and just like happy there.
That's
it's
amazing.
so beautiful on Vancouver Island. So if I can get a good following and have like consistent income from my business and stores, then that'll free me up to move back where I consider my home.
Absolutely.
And
And then you also do the poke tattoos, hand poke tattoos as well.
Yes.
So that's amazing. So you've got multiple different, avenues and talents going for you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
I
that's
do a little bit of
amazing.
everything.
That's amazing. They say the best entrepreneurs have about 7 different streams of income coming in. So that's amazing that you're already, halfway there.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great having you on. Feel free to check out next week's episode of Embracing Amazing.